Some buyers may not know all that is involved with getting a home inspection, including the benefits, pros, cons, or ways you can use home inspections to give your offer the leading advantage. I'd like to walk you through the process so you know exactly what to expect. If you're selling your home, it's also important to understand what the buyer will be going through, who's on the other side of the transaction. My name is Paige Hyatt, and I'm a real estate broker in Bozeman, Montana, with Montana Good Life Properties eXp Realty. I want to share with you everything you need to know when it comes to getting a home inspection. If you're buying a home, you want to make sure that it's going to be a good fit for you and your family, and it's going to be safe, and more importantly, what you're getting into. Because the last thing I want to happen is for you to buy that home, and shortly after moving in, things start falling apart, and now you're coming out of pocket for all kinds of expenses that you weren't prepared for. There's an easy way to prevent that. And now your whole home buying experience isn't quite so great. I don't want that to happen to you. So here's what you need to know when it comes to your home inspection. Traditionally, when you're buying a home in Montana, you're going to have an inspection period as part of your contract. Usually anywhere from about, let's say 12 to 18 days, but it depends on how your agent writes that contract. This will also vary based on competition and market conditions. When we're in a very busy market, like we have been going through, you're going to find buyers who might be willing to buy a home without that home inspection. Now that can be a little bit of a scary thought, so you need to be competitive if you want, and if you want to be competitive, you need to understand when you should waive it and when you shouldn't. Here's also something that can be done before you write the offer on the property. You could write an offer that has a limited inspection contingency. This method is highly dependent upon you working with an agent that understands how offers are written, construction process, and what you should and shouldn't negotiate, and that particular property. So what I'm talking about is narrowing the scope of what you may negotiate. So when you come up against those other offers that all have normal inspection contingencies, you could likely get bumped to the front of the line and beat the competition and get that house you want. This strategy doesn't work for all houses and all buyers. So again, you'll want to know your options based on that particular property and rely on your agent to know what the best choice is for you. When it comes to the inspection contingency itself, generally, here's what a typical inspection is for. It's really to look at the key components of the house. HVAC system, if you're not familiar with that, it's heating, ventilation, and cooling. HVAC, so your heater and AC essentially. You'll want to look at plumbing, electrical, the roof, the foundation, those kind of key components for the house, the big ticket items. We are also looking at health and safety items. So you want to make sure that there's no unsafe electrical. We don't want to have plumbing that's dripping, causing mold issues, things like that. These are all covered during that inspection. We'll probably test the radon, which is something we do for most homes here. I'll put a link down below about that so you can understand what that means. These are really the things we're looking for. Now, an inspector is going to note condition and function of all of these things. In addition, they'll also note lots of small, tiny things, like there's a little hole in the wall here, there's a scratch there, there's a bump on the floor, little things like that. Well, those are cosmetic things. Typically, when you're buying a home that's not new construction, you're taking that home as is when it comes to those smaller cosmetic things. I like to look at that part of the inspection list as sort of a to-do list for the house as you move in order of priority. But if it's for, let's say, the HVAC system not working properly, then we might negotiate that with the seller. Maybe the electrical is miswired or maybe outdated, or you're going to have to spend some money to redo that electrical and that wasn't something you anticipated. That also might be something we'll negotiate. But the smaller things, like I mentioned, those are primarily cosmetic things. Most of the time, you'll take those as is. Now, when the inspector comes out, you have to understand that they are a general home inspector. They're looking at the whole entire house. They're considered a generalist. They are not a specialist. So what sometimes happens during that home inspection is when we meet with them for the walkthrough, they'll say, hey, I saw something in the electrical. This doesn't appear to be wired right. I recommend you have an electrician come out and evaluate. Or, hey, the roof is sagging a little bit over this part of the garage. I recommend you have a roofer come out and take a look. That sort of thing. So now you're moving from the generalist to having a specialist come out. Then you can actually start to attach numbers to what it would actually cost to complete that repair that general home inspector has found, whatever that might be. That's something I work through with my clients. We'll get you connected with all the specialists that you need so you know exactly what you're looking at and what it will cost, so there are no surprises. Once you know these numbers, you're going to have a few choices on what you could do. Number one, just understand this is what I'm buying and you take it as is, right? That could be if you have waived the inspection contingency or there's nothing major that's come up. So that's the first situation when we have a restricted or ratcheted down home contingency. Or if we're just looking at major systems, health and safety, we'll still have the entire inspection done. We'll just be negotiating that differently. So we wouldn't expect the smaller items to be handled in that case, but you'd have a good idea of what you're purchasing and how to proceed moving forward, and we'd be looking for those health, safety, major items. Now, let's take an example where we're looking at a standard home inspection contingency. You have a few different options. You could say, hey, we're good with the house as is. We're going to remove our inspection contingency after it's done. This choice depends on a few factors, such as the actual results of that home inspection and what we found, how competitive the offer process was, do they have a backup, and some other information that I may have gotten from my communications with that other agent. Option two is you could request repairs directly from the seller. Hey, we want you to fix this and this and this and this. And it's really all negotiable at that point. There are no guarantees. The seller has no obligation to make any of these repairs, no matter what they are. It's all part of those negotiations. So you've got to decide what you want to request and what is reasonable. Again, I can't stress enough the importance of a solid agent that can advise you on what is appropriate based on that particular situation, their experience, and those communications they've had with the other agent to understand what sort of a seller we're dealing with. They can come back and they can say, okay, we'll take care of all of them, or we'll do none of them, or we'll meet you in the middle. Or they could come back with another option where they'll give you a credit in lieu of the repairs. So that means rather than the seller actually completing those repairs that you want done, they just give you either a credit towards reducing the purchase price that you offered or towards closing costs, so you bring less money to the closing table. Lately, we've also been seeing seller credits that go to buy down the interest rate if the rate's higher, which can be an option in some cases and some negotiations. With the closing cost credit, you can use that money to make the repairs after it closes escrow. So that means less money out of your pocket that you can use for those. Now, I'm personally a fan of option 2 or 3. What I found in my years of experience is when I'm representing a buyer and we ask the seller to make the repairs, quite often, the buyer isn't satisfied with the repairs that the seller makes because they don't have any skin in the game. They're moving away from the property. Whether they hired the highest end contractor in the area or the guy from the Home Depot parking lot, sometimes the buyer's just not happy with how the repairs are done. So I found what's best is let's just get you that credit. Then after the property closes, you can hire the contractor you choose or take the rate buy down, which doesn't pay for the repairs, but means that there's less money coming out of your pocket going to the mortgage that could be put towards that work. So it depends on your situation. This way, you do the repairs, make sure somebody that you know, like, and trust is doing the work and you're satisfied with the work. Or you do it yourself. So those are the things you want to know when it comes to a home inspection. The other thing you may want to consider during this process is getting a home warranty, which can also help you out with some of those home inspection items. So even if you get a home inspection done and everything looks good, maybe you have an issue. For example, the refrigerator maybe has an issue 2 weeks after you move in. There was no issue in the home inspection, it was working fine, but you move in once the seller has moved out and the ice starts frosting over. It blows out one of the motors and now there's a repair to make. Well, you can use the home warranty for that repair, and what that'll do is cover you for the first year of ownership in most cases where there's an issue that occurs. You just simply pay a deductible. Usually it's $50 to $100 depending on the type of warranty you choose, and the home warranty company will cover the rest of the cost. This also works really well if you have let's say a fully functioning furnace or AC, but maybe it's reaching the end of its service life. Maybe it's working just fine, but it's 15, 20 years old. That warranty will give you peace of mind that if something happens, you'll either get a repair done or a chunk of money that can go towards a replacement. So these are some of the other things to consider as part of that inspection process, and I can help you with more info on those. So be sure to reach out to me. You can message or text me below, and I can share a little bit more about our special VIP buyer program. My name is Paige Hyatt with Montana Good Life Properties. Thanks for tuning in.